Hi guys, finally the tutorial for DrawScatter. This will be only a tutorial on DrawScatter. I will make different videos for DrawArray and DrawMesh, which is a new one that's coming with the updates that I will release soon. I decided to separate them to not have too long videos, so it will be more digestible for everyone. So it took long to release these videos, but moving countries takes time and a lot of energy. So here it is, but I've been developing a lot, all of these tools. I'm very eager to show you what's up and all of the updates. So this is a thing we'll come back to later. I thought it would be just a more interesting starting screen for you guys. I'll go through the updates and all of the features of DrawScatter for those who don't know what it is and for those who've been using it, and see what's new, and but roughly the behaviors are the same. So I have a scene here with just a few assets on the side and some primitives. I like to work with primitives because it's less distracting and we can see a bit better what we're doing. So what I've done only so far is just importing DrawScatter object, like drag and drop in the scene, and then you have that circle. You're not confined to a circle, of course. You can have any shape, you can draw anything, you can even have meshes that use DrawScatter. So the basics of Scatter. Here are all of the settings. I'll go quickly over them, so it doesn't take too much time because it's quite straightforward. Before I only had the option for scatter collection. For convenience, I thought adding the ability to just pick one object would be very convenient. So that's why I added now. And you can also combine the two. So if I add a torus here, a white torus that is not in my asset collection, I can come and bring the primitives, which are these three, and add the torus to the selection. This is very useful because you can also customize. Say you have a setting of scattering with these primitives, then you can add one of an external object to your scattering, which is cool. For example, if I bring this guy, put it back to 0. So I just created an instance, collection instance on that collection with the character, and then here it is. So see, same setup but different customizations. So that's for the most basic. Then you can, of course, in edit mode, if I delete, usually that's what I'm doing, and then go on the top view and you can start drawing. One cool aspect is that if you draw something like this, you can start removing from the scatter, and the more you have, the more you can control this. Why it's cool? Because if you have, let's say, grass, like a field of grass, so let's say you have a big scattering like this, and then in there, let's pick only an object that's green, just to more or less take grass. And in there you want to have a path, so you can just draw this like that, and then it's gonna do its best to draw a path. You will also just have one like this. So it's not perfect in the way it works, but it does work. It needs to be inside. And it's an easy way, very fast way to be able to control a bit your scattering like that. So let's go back to our primitives so we can see what we're doing a bit better. And let's see for the snap on surface, because that's one of the most useful features, especially if you do large scenes. Let's say I have a sort of a plane that I'm gonna sculpt very quickly. So now I have an uneven plane and my objects are overhanging because they are on the curve. By the way, if you angle it, you can keep your object on the curve like this. It could be useful in certain cases. I thought that could be a cool feature for anyone who's a bit creative with this. Here the same, you can pick a collection or you can pick one object in particular, and here you have it. Now the placement of the curve doesn't matter, it's gonna stick to the surface as below. You can align on the surface or not, depending on what you need. The advantage of this is that if you have trees or something that's not supposed to follow the curvature, you can have it just pointing straight up. One cool feature is the slope cutout. Let me exaggerate a bit some of these slopes. So let's say you have a cliff or anything that's a bit with quite a steep angle like this. You can cut out by the slope which means that it won't populate on these surfaces, as if you had grass that's not growing on rocks, for example. So you can crank this up and completely remove it, or have a bit contaminating it. So that's very useful. Let me delete this for now. Remove the snap-on surface. Also, if you have it on, but you don't have anything there, it's not gonna do it. So you could leave it on, but it's just a safety measure. Let me go back. So here, I'll just put this darker, it's too bright. So once you have your objects, let's say you want to sync them in a bit more or offset them. So you can use the object offset. It's just gonna push them on their normal. So if they are aligned surface, they are gonna push them up or down. It's useful if you want to control a bit the placement of the objects. Then you have control of the overall rotation. So this time I come back here. So it's the rotation of the objects regardless of their orientation after the scattering, and control over the scale. You have a random scale that you can activate or deactivate, and a random snap. So the snapping I will show you with the cube. So you can see here that the cubes are randomly rotated because they are rotated over 360 degrees. The way this works, I wanted to avoid having too many sliders. So I have till 180, it will be snapped to the angle that you're specifying. And after 180, it will be completely random. So you can see here, I will make this direction now. Let's have an extrusion here so we can see which face is which. So you can see they are randomly rotated on 80 degrees, 180. If I go more, it's gonna start to be random again. So it means that you can have them 180, you can have them at 45 degrees, you can have them at 80 degrees. So one slider and you can have all of these features at once. And this of course is very useful if you want to have some man-made features like a city, or you want something a bit sci-fi and even create some patterns with shapes like this. You can scale them and you can create a network of streets, for example, if you increase the distance and then you increase here, just as an example, or you could have them rotated 85 degrees. Let's take this back, and 0, it's no rotation. And the random scale I just showed. What you can do is transform your scattering into an outline. So basically, instead of scattering on the inside, it goes and scatter around the curve. And you can, of course, control the edge cutout. And what it does, it will use roughly the same placement between the two. So if you set up what you want to have inside, what is going to be outside will be roughly at the same space. You can control the edge scale, which means the closer you get to the border, the smaller the object will be. That's good to help with transitions between what's surrounding different scattering system, or even when there's grass fading onto rocks or anything. After, if I remove any sort of scaling, I will show you this one, just to change flavors. So there is a random scaling happening based on a noise. And this one is really nice because it gives a bit more natural feeling to a random scale compared to this one that's completely random. So you can combine the two, of course, if you want to add. But having this as a random for patches of grass, like a wide field, works way better than having just completely random. And the seed is the seed of the noise, so you can change the pattern to find something that you like. And change the scale of the noise, so the higher it is, the more random it looks. And the smaller it is, the more uniform it will be. And then I have some culling features that I rarely use, because I prefer to control my density by hand, meaning having different scattering that are fading into the distance in terms of dimension. Like this I control way more, because you can just draw your curve even from the camera point of view if you have the mode surface, so you don't need this as much. But here it is, you can control the distance, so it's based on the active camera and the fall off. So like this you can see a bit how it works. You can add a padding in case it's cutting off too early, and then you can tweak the field of view just to control a bit more. But the system is very optimized, so I very rarely use it. Let me know if no one actually uses it, I can just remove it. It doesn't take much space, but still. So that's it for the basic features. Now I want to show one of the best feature and most useful is when you start stacking the scattering on top of each other. So what I mean by this, and that's when I start creating what I call biome-like behavior. So if let's say I have a collection of grass, so I have that grass patches scattered around, and I want the grass to occupy most of the space here, but then I want bigger asset at the center, so like the trees, which would happen in general. You have your big asset at the center of your scattering and then smaller and smaller assets as you go towards the outer edges. So here I have way too many trees, 4 meters, maybe 6. Let them breathe a bit. And what you can do is use the edge cutout to remove the trees that are on the border and only have them towards the center of your scattering. And you could have, why not, an edge scaling a bit, even if it's strange to have the small tree. So you can have a bit of random scaling and really cutting out a lot of what's outside. So, oops, I forgot, sorry, to enable the screencasting. So what I did, let me start over. What I did, I take the first scatter object, the curve, I Alt-D to duplicate it, so it's exactly the same. And then, for example, I can change the seed, so the same asset is scattered on a different seed, and you can change the seed of the pattern, so it's actually way more different. Here you can see the two different ones. But what I want now is to have my tree. Let's add 5 and put a lot of edge cutout now. Remove this. So now I have grass that goes all the way and then trees that are mostly just in the center. And I can continue. So I can duplicate it again with Alt-D, and this time I can add, let's say, the fern here. So if you keep the same seed, they will point exactly at the same side, same position, which can be useful. But in this case, I want something different, a bit more density, way more cutouts because I don't want them everywhere, more random scaling. So you can see how now I start to have this sort of behavior of a biome a bit. Let's add one more. That will be some flowers. So I can cut out a lot of the pattern, a lot of the edge. And because I'm using the same seed for the noise, they will be where the grass is. So it's gonna keep the consistency between the two. I have a bit less. And the advantage of working like this, why did we duplicate it, is that now if I go into edit mode into any of them, I can delete, it will delete everything. And if I start drawing, I will draw my full biome at once with one stroke. And you can see it's keeping the behavior that we decided earlier. So if the curve is too small, you will only have the smaller objects. But the higher you make it, the more of the bigger objects will be. And this is really nice because you can just decide to have smaller scattering that will have your smaller objects, and then you can have the big ones whenever you draw a bigger curve. And all of this, of course, if you decide to to select all of them at once, press Alt and snap on surface, and because this was already selected, they are going to be snapped on the surface. The trees, I can remove the alignment, and now I have my scattering happening on the terrain, and it's dynamic. So that's when you can start to have something very powerful in terms of the way you scatter your biomes. That's why I like this way of working with the tools, because it's very simple one when we were using only one curve, but now starting to add more layers to it, you can have a behavior that's way more interesting. See, and then you still retain full control. And if you want, you could save these 4 curves to a collection or a collection, put it in your library, and then, or even just copy and paste it into a different scene, which is really useful. You reuse very fast. So that's how I did this one. So in this biome, I want to take advantage and show what is ProxyMaker and the massive update I just made for it. Actually, when I started recording this tutorial, I had to restart because I realized that ProxyMaker was a bit broken and was not doing exactly what I needed. And it was causing problems also with some library of assets like Botanic that were turning all black. So the new version of DrawScatter, and ProxyMaker will handle this way better. And the advantage is that ProxyMaker now can be used for any purposes, not necessarily for DrawScatter and DrawArray. You can use it for any type of scattering of assets, or even just to simplify an asset. I'll show you how it works. It's very versatile now. So you can see that I have this scene that's fairly optimized. There's something that you need to know also. If you work in cycles, the render view in cycle is way faster, so you can see that it's fairly responsive right now. But if I am in the shading, it's a bit slower. So it's a good way to sometimes work faster, really, depending on your hardware, of course. So that's where ProxyMaker comes, is that the goal is to have the ability to optimize the poly count in your scene to help Blender handle this a bit better. Have the face orientation, so it's red. So I will show you the different modes. So the first one is delete points, is the one that will come if you bring the modifier. Delete point is intended for foliage, like this. If I take this, for example, and I isolate it, so here I have 40% of the polygons that are being removed. You can increase it. The goal of this is to check, for example, in a render view or even a preview, how much you can remove and keep as much fidelity as you want. And you can switch between the original or the other one. And you can see, because if you're scattering something that's a bit far, you don't need to have that much density, basically. And so it's very useful to have this ability to just remove to a point where it becomes okay in the viewport, and then when you do the render, this asset will be switched for the full one afterwards. You can see here all of my grass and the plants, they have 40% of their points being removed. So it's pretty useful. If I, for example, select all of these, when you select all of these, when you make a change, press 0.7 and press Alt before Enter, it will apply to all of the modifiers that you have selected. So now you can see, I will turn on, sorry, this because I'm already seeing. And now you can see that it looks way more, like, doesn't look really fluffy. But that's when you can start dialing in and see what works and what is a good compromise between speed and fidelity. So that's for foliage. And I did the same for the tree here. So I have here 0.6, but if I do 0.4, I can have it more fluffy. It's just a matter of compromising. And this is only for preview in your viewport. It's for comfort, because afterwards it's gonna be automatically switched. The second mode, and I'll probably show the third one as well, is decimate. So the way the decimate works, it's basically decimating by the distance. So if it's at 0, it's the full mesh. And then it's just gonna decimate to a certain sort of factor, which is a distance. So you can choose how much polygon you only want to keep, and it will do its best to keep the texture and the material of the initial object. So this is really good for preview, because it has the same shape and it has roughly the same texture, but it's way lighter. So this one works pretty well. Sometimes it might not work on some objects for some reason. So that's why I made also a remesh, and this one is using voxels. So you can define the number of voxels. The UVs might break sometimes. I don't know yet how to fix this, but same, it's still for preview. And if it's a small object that you're gonna scatter a lot, you don't need to have all of the texture. You're gonna see it from here. All of the info are there without any problem. So you can even turn down as much as you want, even 10, and you can see what the amount of polygons you have. It's nothing, and you keep the shape and you keep your volume and the values, the noise of the texture. So you have all of the info that you need. But this is mostly up to choice, and then you can pick between these two. I recommend not to use the delete points for solid objects, because that's what you end up with, and that's not very useful. So this is for ProxyMaker version 2. Works way better than the first one, and has way more use cases. I did the same here, just decimating the object, and it's gonna try to not destroy too much the initial shape. So it's a good way to have this. You could also use this not as a proxy maker, but to create stylized assets or deformed, or just be creative with the way these assets are being used and the way they you customize them and just for different purposes. So that's it for DrawScatter. I think it's a good use case. It's a very, very useful tool. And with the help of the proxy, you can have this being really, really optimized. One aspect also I work on for convenience, same for draw terrain and all of my my modifiers. I try to make them so you can update them without losing the presets that you have and your settings. So, for example, this scene initially was made with the previous version as a demo or even just as a test. So I reopened the previous version, and you can see here, if I grab one of them, this is an older version, and it even has a different name, like before I renamed it. So what you can do, there is a way to remap to the latest version in one go. If I take, for example, DrawScatter 2 that I import on a plane, if I click on this one, you can see those are two different modifiers. So here, go in Blender File, Node Group. You can spot your the modifier that you want to change. Select it, right-click, and remap user. Then here it's going to give you the option with what user you want to remap it with, and select DrawScatter to remap. And then all of the assets that all of the scattering system now are using the version 2. So there's changes you could see on the size because I might have changed one or two things around, but the biggest part of your setup is being kept. So that aspect, I found a way to do this, and as much as I can, I'm trying to keep that so it's upgradable. So whenever you switch to a new version, most of your setup can be transferred. So that's what I wanted to say about DrawScatter. I hope you enjoy. When version 2 of DrawScatter and all of my updates come out, the prices will go up as well. When I make major updates, people who already bought it will have it for free, but the price will come up. So if you're hesitating to get it, I don't want to put pressure, but just saying in advance that the price will go a bit up. I hope you understand. It's because I spend way more time developing them and trying to make it as useful and I'm trying to make them in a way so everyone can integrate them in their workflow, in their pipeline, the best I can. And I am probably going to release some of my scripts that I did for free eventually, because they are starting to be crossing the boundaries of each of these three products, and I also want to help people. So I'll explain a bit more on this for the draw array tutorial. See you guys, thanks!